Today we're playing Oil, Water and Vampires. The Sudoku puzzle, of course. Now, Oil and Water, I'm sure that many of you are familiar with, certainly anyone that's seen the channel before. It's a phenomenal series of puzzles from Blobz, where it essentially is a parity puzzle that mixes oil and water, or doesn't mix oil and water, because these are two elements that shouldn't mix. And no, I'm not counting shaking a container vigorously with the two of them, or some sort of emulsifier with them. Now, there's the word vampires. You can clearly see in the thumbnail here. Sleuth turned into a vampire by drinking, we'll call it a red liquid, I'm not going to give it a name, and is swimming in a puddle of water and oil and red liquid, and has turned into a vampire as a result of that. Right, let's take a look at the puzzle and look away from this gruesome thumbnail for the moment. So, rule sets for today. Normal Sudoku rules apply. That means place the digits 1 to 9 once each in every row, in every column, and in every 3x3 box. Fairly standard. Each cage is either full of oil, which are even digits, or full of water, which are odd digits, or a mix of both. In all cases, each row within a cage is just one type, oil or water. So let me sort of try and use an example here. Let's think about this 9 cage. Essentially, is the 9 cage the best one? Can I have a look at others? 8 cage. So essentially it's either entirely made up of oil. I'm going to use green for oil here. And therefore it's entirely made up of even digits. Or it's made up of water, and therefore it's entirely made up of odd digits. Or the last option is it's a mix. And therefore oil has to be in one row, water has to be in another. We're not mixing the two. Don't count emulsifier, don't count shaking anything. This cannot mix. And the other thing as well is that oil floats on top of water. So essentially the odd digits are always at the bottom, the even digits are always at the top. And that would be a valid set of pencil marks for an equality, not an equality cage, for an oil and water cage. Digits do not repeat in the cage, and they sum up to the value shown. And I guess that's helpful when you think about cells like this one. It means it's just not any of these three either. But in general, most of the cells are either in the same box, or in the same column, or in the same row. So generally, it's not a required statement. Now, here is the tricky bit. This is where I've really, this is the first time I'm featuring one of these vampire variants. And it's not an uncommon variant, by the way. But you're probably looking at some of these cages and you're thinking, some of these are impossible. Take a look at this one, for example. That's a 0. And normal Sudoku rules apply. So the digit 0, even though I can write it, it doesn't apply. And that's because we have today vampires and victims. So there are 9 vampire cells, there are 9 victim cells. And the thing is, Sudoku rules do apply to them. So you can only have, and I'm going to use vampire with red, don't ask why. They have to be 1 in every box. They have to be 1 in every column, 1 in every row. Am I doing that correctly? So that would be sort of a valid pencil mark where I've got 1 in every row, 1 in every box, 1 in every column. And obviously I can't have that vampire cell in the same column. That doesn't work. We equally have a victim cell. And I'm going to use yellow for the victim cells. I'm also going to use yellow for the solve. And I'm going to just make it easy. What I'm going to do is essentially just, does that work? Kind of. I was trying to make this easier for myself, and then I ended up making it a bit harder, actually. Where am I missing one? Here. That looks like valid Sudoku. And essentially the way that this works is, whatever the vampire is, and they don't have to be adjacent, by the way. I mean, I just picked them adjacent for my own sanity, but they don't actually have to be adjacent to one another. Whatever the victim is, let's say that's a 2, well, the vampire now, let's say that's a 9, is actually equal to 9 and the 2. So that cell would count towards 11 now in its cage. and the victim will count as 0 towards its own cage. Last thing about the vampires and victims is, essentially, we've got 9 of them. As you can see, 9 yellows, 9 reds, and they're actually the digits 1 to 9, once each. So whenever you can actually use that to decide if this is a 9, well, none of the other red cells around the grid can be a 9. If you're confused, stick around. I'm about to give this a solve. And if you don't want me to see the solve just yet and maybe refer to it later, link will be in the description down below as usual. Obviously, don't drink from any red cell. Stay healthy. Conquer oil, water, and vampires with a link in the description down below. And with that said, all I'm going to do now is start my own solve and restart and see what's going on. So normally under oil and water, what I do is I go around and I start coloring a whole bunch of boxes with what would have to be composed of even and odd digits, but it's not going to work this time. And the reason I'm saying it's not going to work is, let me pick one here, for example. I've got 2 cells that add up to an odd digit. That's a perfect example where I can't, and they have to be the same parity. So 2 evens wouldn't work, 2 odds wouldn't work, but you can always introduce a 3rd digit. And essentially that could be any parity, and it will influence obviously the overall parity of the box. So really we need to try and figure out as quickly as we can, where are the vampire cells, where are the victim cells, before we stand a chance of trying to actually color anything with oil and water. Right. 19 and 2 cells clearly has a vampire. 23 and 2 cells clearly has a vampire. I've already got something in row 5. That is not the vampire cell. This is the vampire cell. 19 clearly has, again, a vampire cell in it. And it's not this cell because of here. That's the vampire cell. Now the vampire cells in box 8 are down the left-hand column. I'm also going to highlight victim cells like this 0. Clearly it is not, and this 1 here and this 2, they clearly are victim cells, or at least there's a victim cell amongst them. Here's another victim cell as well in this 2-cell 1 cage, although I know which one it is because these 2 are lining up. That means there are no victim cells in columns 2 or 3 in box 4. That's not the victim cell, that's the victim cell. That means there is a victim cell in here in box 5. Where else? There's nothing else necessarily obvious. So I am going to start the solve now and see. I mean, one thing that I can see almost instantly, for example, is that's a 1. This has to have a 2. This is also 1. So in fact, that's the 1. That can't be the victim. This is the victim. That can't be the victim. Therefore, that's the 2. And that is the victim, and therefore is not the 2. Sort of essentially, there's a 0. We need to still add up to the, pardon me, there's a 0 in this combination in this pair. And then the other cell is essentially the cell value, the cage value. So that's clearly the 1. Well, that's not the 1, that's the 1. Therefore, that's the victim, that's the 0. Same here. Well, that's not the victim. That has to be the 2 to match the essentially the total, and that's the 0. Now, what we can also now do is actually color some of these. I didn't mean to make that oil. That's water because it's odd. That's water because it's odd. I am going to stick to the flashes, by the way, because I do need to keep a running count of what is even and odd as we sort of make progress. So think about this cell. No, that's not a 1. We don't know what it is. That's clearly got the vampire cell in here. I don't know why I didn't spot this earlier. That's 2 cells that add up to 18. That's impossible. Therefore, that's not the vampire. This is the vampire. Vampire in box 6 now is in here. Vampire in box 7 is in there. Can I do better? Not yet. Progress, though. I'll take anything really at this point. Right, so no vampires or victims in this 9 cage. We know at a minimum this got to have an odd digit. That can be 3 odd digits. I can do 1, 3, and 5. Or I could do an odd digit with 2 evens. Without the 2, though, and no vampire cells, the minimum would be 4 and 6. That's too big. That's 10. Sorry, I mean without any victim cells. So 4 and 6 is too big. That is all odd. This is 1, 3, 5. This is from 4, 6, or 8. This is not 1, 3, or 5. It is 7 or 9. Which probably would help me here if I think about it. So how do I get to 19 now? If this is 6 and 8, that would be 14. And that would have to be a 5 to get to 19. So these 2 cells have to be odd. And 7, 9, and 3 would do. And I'm guessing because I'm using the maximum digits, essentially 7 and 9, there's no other combo. 7 and 9 is 16 and 3. Yep. So this is 3, 7, 9. And essentially, whatever this value is added into here to make up the 19. We've already got 4 digits. That's clearly got to be oil, since they all need to be the same parity, and they're not, given we've got the vampire and victim. So all of these are even. This cell sees all the odd digits, because one of the 7, 9, I mean, whatever it is, 3, 7, 9, they're all different, plus 1 and 5. That's the last even digit, that's the last odd digit, and it's a 5. Let's think about this cell for a second. So my options are 7 and 9, which actually works. I think that is forced, isn't it? Let's think about this. Because my other option is 6 and 8, which is 14, with a 5 only gets me to 19. That doesn't work. That is 7, 9. That is all odd. This is all even. I mean, I'll keep the white flash because I don't know which one is the vampire cell at the moment. See, because again, you'd be very tempted to think that they're both even to make up 12. But again, because this is a vampire cell, I could have an odd plus a second odd to make an even, plus an even digit. So there's really no guarantees of anything in here. These 2 cells are the same though. Let's think about this. Obviously, if they're both odd, that's very easy. If they're both even, yeah, because of the vampire cell and the odd, I can still get to an odd sum. This is very tough. I've got a victim and a vampire. This, well, hang on. I need... So I've got 7 and 9. That's my 3. That's 7 or 9. And that's all the odd digits, isn't it? That's 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. These are all even. Even digits that add up to 20 must be 2, 4, 6, or 8. Except that's not a 2. I'm sure I can do better. Let's think about, oh, it doesn't actually matter, 4, 6, or 8. Because whatever this even digit, whatever it is, it's adding up to, yeah, it's adding up these 3, which is 4 and 6 is 10, plus the 8 is 18. So I don't actually know anything about it just yet. Ouch. I do have all the even digits though in column 2. These are all odd. 4 odd digits means, no, it doesn't tell me. Oh, this is in the same row, so that has to be still water. And therefore these are indeed even. 2 evens plus an odd. Hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, So there's no way I am adding an odd digit that's in here. These are not, they do not contain the vampire cell. This does contain the vampire cell. And it is a 7-9, just completing the rest. Plus these two cells, whatever they add up to come up to 15. Now my options are, and it doesn't include a 1, so the minimum I can make these is 3, 5, which is an 8. Too big for a 9. Hopefully that made sense. It did in my head, because essentially this 15, because it's summing up this value, is summing up these 3 cells. And because I've already got 1 in the box, the minimum I can put to get towards 15 is 3, 5, and 7, which is in fact the only way I can get to 15. Now, why are these 3, 5? Yeah, because this is already the 7. So yeah, that's 7, that's 3, 5. That's a 9, that's a 7, that's a 9, and yep, these 3, 7, 9s add up to 19. To get to 12, I think this is forced. This has to be 4, 8. That means this is 2, 6, 2, 6. Neither of these are 6 or a 2. This is clearly 2, 6, and this is clearly 2, 6. 2 and 6 in here means that is not a 6. That has to be the 6. Lovely. That's not a vampire. I'm just sort of double checking everything I've done on the left hand side before I move to the right, and so far it's looking okay to me. So let's think about what's going on here. Let's do easy things first. These 2 cells are odd. Essentially, I've got 3 even digits. They still have to have the same parity. Can't have 5 even digits. These are odd. Water, means there's water at the bottom. This is also water. That's 4 odd digits now. One of these is even, one of these is odd. I don't know which one it is. Because there is a victim in here, potentially, I could have 2... Yeah, I could have 2 odd digits plus a 3rd odd digit. So that can still be odd, as weird as that sounds. Right, here's a better one. Essentially, with a vampire cell in here, we know we're adding 3 digits. And 3 digits that add up to 23 is actually forced. It can only be 6, 8, and 9. I kind of need to use that type of logic a bit more often. Yeah, and it doesn't actually force anything on parity. I mean, that's not a 9. That's interesting. So that means that is even. That still could be a 9. But I guess what I was saying that's interesting is both of these could be even, and then I'm adding up a 9 from somewhere in here. The 9 is not the victim. So there's no 9 in here. The 9 is neither the vampire, because this is not a 9. This is the 9. And then there is a 6, 8 in here. What a fantastic puzzle, Blobz. I don't know how people create this magic. That's odd, clearly. Come on, what's next? So I've got 3 odd digits in here. I still need 2 more, which could be these 2, but could be anything else. Could be these 2, for example. It really can be anything. And I have a 6, 8 in here. It's not an 8. I've got a 4, 8 pair, so I've got a 6 in here. That's got to be an 8. That's a 2. That's a 6. That's a 6. That's a 2. Hopefully that made sense, because the 6-8, whichever one this isn't, is in here, and it couldn't have been the 8 because of the 4-8 pair. That means because the 6 is in here, making all of this even, these are all odd, including this cell here. And the 6 is the victim. Yeah, not sure. Not sure. This can't be a victim. Single cell, obviously. And it's not the vampire. We've already written the vampire, so this is just purely a 6. That's not a 6, and therefore not a victim either. That's just a plain old odd digit from 1, 3, 5, and 7. I don't know if I'm going to pencil all of that. We know it's not a 9. That's even. That's my 6. I don't actually know if it doesn't actually help me in terms of which one is the victim and which one isn't. So we need 3 digits that add up to 19. Yeah, until we know what the victim is, it's sort of hard, because again, we can mess around with parity. The victim is definitely an odd digit. Whatever these two cells are. See, if it's even, it's 4 and 8, which is only 12, and then I need a 7 victim, which is possible. The only victims I've got so far are 9 and a 3, 5, and a 6. So that actually would work. So this can be even, unfortunately. I don't know what it is. Now, if it is odd, what would that be? I mean, if the victim is 7, for example, I could do 1 and 9. I mean, there's so many options. So this is not the route to determine the parity of these. So the 6 is in here. The 8 is in there. I'm feeling uninspired. I just need to sort of try and make a bit more progress. The fact that I've got the vampire and the victim in here would be really helpful if I can figure out what the rest is. But I don't. I don't know what to do about that. This is not a victim nor a vampire. This is not a victim, but it could be a vampire. So again, it doesn't help me with my parity. Right. Sleuth, pay attention. 5 cells. Can't have all of them be even. These two are odd. That's my 5 odds. These are all evens. That I am almost certain has to be the 6 now. Even with 3 odds, actually no, that does work. So no, it doesn't have to be. In fact, it is almost certainly not the 6. Yeah, because they all have to be the same color. I don't know why I didn't see that earlier. That's the 6. That's my victim. This is a 0, therefore this is a 9 to add up to a 9 on the cage. This is not a victim. These now, well, these are from 2 and 4. These are from, well, we've got 1, 5, and 9. This is 3, 7. This is 1, 5. Can't be too big in here. Let me just think about my options. So 1, 5, 7, and 3. And this cell here is also 1, 3, or 5. It's not 9 or 7. So if this is 7 and 5, I'm pretty sure I've broken it. Because that would be 12, and it almost doesn't matter what the rest are. So my options are 1, 3, 5, which adds up to 9 with a 4, or 1, 3, 7, which adds up to So 1 and 3 are in here, which doesn't help me because I've got... 3 odd digits. So let me just think about... Oh, no, I really need to solve what these are first. How do I do that? How do I figure this out? So these are neither vampire nor... So I'm fairly sure that these 3 cells have to be even. Let's think about it. I could have another 2 odd digits in here. So I could have 4 odd digits with a 9. That would make 1, 3, 5, 7. That would be a total of 16 with an 8. That actually does work, but the only thing that's guaranteed is this is even. Because this is even, these 2 have to be odd. Can't have 2 cells that are even now. I still need 5 odd digits. So my options are, even if I make all of these odd, I still need a 5th. This is one of them. If I make these 2 even, I need to put an 8, but of course I can have a victim. So this is not... Oh, hang on. I know the victim now, because this is 19. I think this is forced. It's 9, 7, and 3. Yes. So this is 3, 7, 9, because they need to add up to 19 between the 3 cells. So the victim can't be an 8. And that's the only available even digit if I make these 2 even. So these 2 are even. These 2 are odd. That's not a 9, that's 3 or 7. And my victim in here is not the 3. No, not the 9. So it's the 3 or 7. And essentially in here I've got 1, 5, which do add up to 6, with the 3 or 7, whichever one is the victim basically. This 3, 7 tells me that's a 9. That's not a 9. Well, or 8, that's a 3 or 7. These now are 2, 4, not 6, 8. That's 14. These 2 cells need up to the remainder, which is 8. And frustratingly, both 7, 1 and 5, 3 work. How is this such a struggle? What's going on here? And the 13 down here, essentially because these add up to 8, this will be 8. There'll be a victim that is a 5 somewhere in these that adds up to this. Am I missing some obvious Sudoku that will just move this a lot further forward? Maybe the victim here is a 5. And I said, yeah, if the victim here is a 5, because these are 8, we need a victim of 5 to add up to 13. That can't be the victim. That's a 3. That's a 5. The victim now can't be a 3 in here. It's got to be a 7. So that's the... undo. That's the 3. And the victim that's in here is a 7. And the victim that's somewhere in this mix is a 5. Wow. And because it's a 5, Sleuth, the 5 in column 4 has to be in here. That's a 5, that's a 3. That's not 5 or 3, that's 1 or 7. That's 8. That can't be 1. We already said the 7 and 5 can't be in here. That's a 3. That's now 7 and 3 is 10, 11 to get to 13. That's got to be a 2. That's got to be a 4. Finally, some progress. These are now 1 and 7. And this is not the 1, that's the 7, that's the 1. The 7 is not a vampire. The 1 is the vampire. Wow. I don't know if I went about this kind of the hard way. Really feels like I did, but doesn't matter, I'm there. So these are 359, just the remaining odd digits that are not 1 and 7. These now are 1, 4, and 8. These now are 2, 6, and 7. 6, not 5. This is not a 3. We know that there is a victim in here because this is not a 1, 3 anymore. So there is a victim that adds up to 0, and therefore I need to have a 4. Therefore this is even. In fact, surely the rest of this is... No, I do have a 1 left. That's somewhere in these two cells. But essentially I have the victim... We don't know what it is actually. It's not a 6. So it's a 4 or 2, 8. With a definite 4 in here. Now completing, well, that's not an 8. Completing column 6. Essentially, I need another 1, 5, 7. And it's not 1 or 7. That's a 5. These are not 5s. Now remember, the 7 is the victim. So that gives me a column victim in here. Which I didn't really... Oh, well, it does say that essentially one of these is a victim now. Figure out which one it is. Rest of this column is essentially a... Did I make this? Yeah, I did this the wrong way around. Sorry about that. I meant to say that's not a 5. That's 2, 4, or 5. Essentially, it can't be 1, 7. So the 1, 7s have to be up here. There's a 5 for sure in there now. And remember, there's a 5 for sure in here, and one of these has to be the victim. Because the 5 is the victim to add up to essentially make that a 6 plus the 7 to get to 13. Because one of these is the victim, that's not the victim. This is the victim, and therefore it's not the 4, that's the 4. These are not 4s anymore. That's a 2, 5. This is 6, 8. How do I make an 8 cage? It's surely going to be the 6 with a 2. It has to be the same parity on the same level. That's a 2 and it's not a victim. That's a 6. That's an 8. That's a 5 and it is the victim. That 8 gives me a 4 in here and 8. How are we doing? We're coming up to 30 minutes. This is a tough puzzle for sure. That's not a 2. That's a 4, 8. Does it help me in here? Can I figure out which one is the 1, 7? Not really. Surely I can, though. I've got to be able to. We know that it doesn't matter which one is the victim in here. We know that the 7 is the victim, which makes this a 1. Because there are no victims in this column. And the 7 is the victim, so that's a 1. That's a 7. That's a 1. This is now a 5, 7 pair, and one of them is the victim. Put a white on it again, white flash, to figure out which one it is. Hard work. 2, 6, 7 and a 17 cage. I need a vampire, because regardless of what I put in here, it's not going to be big enough to get to 17. That's a vampire. That's not a vampire. Therefore, it's just a solid blue. The vampire now is kind of in an X-wing. This is a victim. This is a victim. These are not victims. So the victim is inside the 3 cage, which means there is a 3 in here. I don't know where it is, by the way. So, and we don't know if the victim is an even number, so we'll figure that out. That's not a 3. These are 1, 2, or 8. Let's just think about the rest of these rows. We need 3, 6, and 7, I'm going to say. In here we need 4, 5, and 9, and then 1, 2, and 8. 18k just looking quite tough. I'm going to have to keep a running count of what's been victims and vampires because yeah, we are definitely going to have to keep a running count, otherwise we're probably not going to be able to solve it. So let's just think about compositions for a second. 12 cage, 26 cage, so if we put the 3 in and the 6 in here, that would make this cage entirely even. And that will get me to 20. And I can't have a victim cell. And that is an even digit. So that's not a 6. That's even. That's odd. Where was I going with this? So my options for 13, because this is even, the victim here is even, means I definitely need to have an odd digit, because it's not going to influence the parity, it'll just repeat it. If these two are odd, plus even, that will remain odd. If these two are even, plus even, it will remain even. So that's got to be odd. And presumably that's got to be even. Otherwise, yeah, if it's two odds, we're back to even. So that's got to be even. From the options that are there, that means it is the 4. Neither of these are 4. These two are odd now. So it's 3, 5, 9, plus a potential vampire of a 2 or 8. Now the 4 in here means I need to get to 9, which means I definitely need this to be the vampire. That's not a vampire. That's not a vampire. That is the vampire. Now, that to get to 9, that could be 7 and 2. That would work. 8 would have to go with a 1, which is not available. So that's 7. That's 2. That's a 6, because it's not 2 or 7. That's a 3. That's a 6. Neither of these are 2 now. Neither is vampire or victim. So let's just do some maths. That's 14 plus 3. That's 17. That's a 1. That's an 8. That's even. That's odd. That's even. That's not 8. We had a 4, 8. Yeah, that's a 4. That gives me an 8 in here. That's not an 8. That's 2, 4 pair. That 4 does a lot of work. That's an 8. That's a 4. That's an 8. Have we got an 8? Yes. That is not a vampire. That is a vampire, because we got an 8 vampire already, so the 6 is the vampire here. Which makes... Oh, we already knew that because this was the vampire cell. That wasn't helpful at all. I was thinking I'm going to figure out which one is the 3 in here, and I didn't. The 9, I feel, yes, we do have a vampire 9. That's a 5. There are no 5s in here. That's a 3, 9. Okay, we can do this. 3, 9 with a 6. That's 12. That's 18. That's got to be 8. Yes, because we don't have victim or vampire in here. That's got to be an 8. That's not an 8. That's even, even. I'm fairly sure we can do the maths here. Let's just think about the 12. Remember, this is a vampire. I'm pretty sure that's a 1. Otherwise, that would get me to a 9, plus whatever these cells are. Oh, that actually does work. I could do 1 and 2. No, I can't do a double 1. No, yeah, 4 and 1. So in fact, that is forced, because remember, I'm adding these 3 cells. It's 10 plus a 2 and a 7. Does that help me with anything down there? Not really. That's odd. That's even. We're at 35 minutes. That 5 gives me a 9 and a 5. That 3 earlier gave me a 9 and a 3. How about some classic Sudoku sometimes, Sleuth? It just feels like, come on. Let's think about the composition of these. I've done all the evens. These are all odds. So this cell basically, plus whatever these two are, plus whatever the victim is, must add up to 10. So I'll figure out what my options are in a second, but what does that do here? I've got 1 even. I mean, even if this is even, it doesn't matter, but I definitely need, well, hang on. This can be even because it's adding up to 10. And in fact, it is an even number because you see 1, 9 wouldn't work. Why would 1, 9 not work? Let me just, I want to do a quick tally of victims. 4 makes this a 1, makes this a 4. Obviously couldn't have a victim that's the same. So actually I just want to check. 1, we don't have a 2 victim, do we? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9. We have an 8 victim that's in here. This is 3, 8. That would make this a 2 because the 8 plus the 2 makes a 10. That's now even. These two are even, and in fact they do add up to 10 with 4 and 6. That's a 6, that's a 4. We're on the finish now. That's a 7. That's 1 or 5. In a 14 cage, it's definitely the 5 with a 9 and a 1. And what I'm going to do is, before I sort of complete this, because it's pretty much done at this point, is just double check that everything is colored correctly. And I normally don't do this, but I think for today it feels like you need to. Obviously oil and water helps me. The water has to be on the bottom. This is even, therefore. That's my 8. That's my 3. That is not the victim. Therefore, this is not the victim. This is the victim. And therefore, this is the 5, and the victim here was 7. Let me just double check. Have I got all the colors correct? Yeah. Looking good. Yeah. And then if I just double check that I have got all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. That's looking good. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Right, just Sudoku for finish. 3 gives me a 5, gives me a 3. That's the 2, and that's the 4. What a fabulous puzzle, Blobz. What an absolutely phenomenal puzzle. Yeah, I mean, let me know in the comments if I should be featuring more of these vampire puzzles. I have generally deliberately avoided them because I struggle even with the most basic of them. But I think despite being 3 stars, despite being relatively complicated with oil and water rule set and vampires, pretty happy with that solve in 40 minutes. I probably took some fairly complex routes, which I'm sure many of you will let me know in the comments down below. But Blobz, what a phenomenal construction. There was always a very, I'm not going to say a very clear, but there was always a logical step to help you make progress. And I don't know how you guys do it as the setters, but Absolutely phenomenal work. So really the only thing left to do at this point is to say, hope that you guys enjoyed the puzzle and the video, and I'll see you back for the next one. Check out the rest of the oil and water series that YouTube's going to recommend to you. And if you haven't subscribed, do subscribe to the channel. Bye-bye for now.